Here's your full voiceover script in English written like a real American, telling his own story with a strong hook, natural pacing pattern, interrupts direct questions to the audience, a big mid-story twist, and a satisfying but debatable ending. It's crafted for a 30-40-minute video at 0.9x reading speed, with flowing sentences that breathe using commas, dashes, and a few ellipses where they help the rhythm. I didn't plan to hire a 6-year-old, but she walked into my office barefoot and shaking and asked for a job like it was the only thing standing between her mother and death. And I swear to you, something in my life split open right there on the marble floor. If a child looked you dead in the eye and said, "Please, sir, I don't want to beg. I want to work so my mom won't die," what would you do? Be honest. Would you protect your schedule or your soul? That Monday started like every Monday, emails stacked to the ceiling, coffee that tasted like ambition, a calendar that owned me more than I owned it. And then Lizzie, my secretary, leaned in and whispered, "Sir, there's a little girl out front who says she wants to work." And I didn't even look up. At first, I just said, "What powerful men say when they're allergic to interruptions. Tell her to come back later, I'm busy." And then Lizzie, who has a sixth sense for the moments that matter, lowered her voice and said, "I think you should see her." I looked up and saw a small figure by the glass doors, brown eyes red from crying, feet, dusty dress faded, clutching a folded paper like a passport to another life. She walked toward my desk, and her little heels didn't click on the floor because she didn't have shoes. That's the detail that sticks with me, the absence of a sound I had heard all my career. "Please, sir," she said, and her voice trembled but did not break. "I'm not here to beg. I need a job so I can take care of my mommy. I don't want her to die." You ever feel a sentence cut through your armor like it already knew the path inside you? Yeah, that happened. She handed me the paper, a crayon drawing of a small girl giving a flower to a tall man under it, in shaky letters, "Please, let me work. I will clean your shoes, I will help my mommy is dying," and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a crack in the ice around my chest. I asked her name. "Rachel," she said, and I nodded like I was trying to convince my own face to be gentle. "What can you do, Rachel? I can sweep. I can run errands. I can be quiet." And the way she said "be quiet" made me want to knock on the door of a world that asks children to be silent to survive. Pattern interrupt. You still with me? This is where pride meets a pair of bare feet and realizes pride has never walked this far. I'm the guy people describe as cold, precise, efficient, the one who doesn't smile unless the market does, and I had earned that reputation on purpose because it kept me safe. But grief can freeze into competence if you let it. And years earlier, I had lost a daughter at the age of 6, and I never told the world how that felt. I just built a tower so tall, maybe the ache wouldn't climb it. Looking at Rachel, I felt a door open that I had nailed shut. "Let's go see your mom," I said, and I reached out my hand. The office stared, like kindness was a scandal, like my hand in hers was a headline security tried to stop us with rules and posture. I kept walking. Some rules protect the building. Some rules protect our hearts. You need to know which ones to break. We drove to a hospital that smelled like time running out. Paint-peeling nurses, moving like every step cost more than they had. Rachel ran to room 8 on bare feet and threw herself against a thin woman's hand. "Mommy, I brought someone," she said, like she had caught a star in her nylon bag. The nurse came in with that tone people use when poverty shows up without an appointment. "We told you you can't be here without money." And I said calmly, "How much is the bill?" She blinked, gave me the figure, and I wired it. "Move her to a private ward, and bring your best doctor in 5 minutes." And when she asked if I was family, I said, "I'm the man who won't let you waste another second." Sir Rachel whispered, "Are you an angel?" And I knelt so we were eye to eye and said, "No, but maybe you are," and I meant it. We sat the rest of that day in the corner of a brighter room, Mabel. That's her mother slid in and out of sleep. Rachel hummed a tune that didn't know all its notes yet, and I found myself watching the way she lifted a spoon to her mother's lips, careful, serious, like feeding was sacred, and I had been forgetting that most of my life. When we left, I put a brown envelope by the bed, not a show, not guilt, just breath for a fire that needed to keep burning, and I promised I would be back. You know what I mean. When your mouth says a small thing, but your heart signs a contract. The next morning, my lobby looked like a gossip column, grew legs, heads, turning whispers, threading the air. So I decided to settle the story. In 10 words, I walked in with Rachel, holding my hand. Pink dress, this time hair in 2 fluffy puffs Lizzie had tamed with bows and patience, and halfway across the marble I stopped, turned and said, "This is Rachel. She is my special assistant. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." And it was quiet in that way. That means people heard you. Some smiled, some didn't, some took notes. They would pretend we're about budgets later. Every company has a storm that wears perfume, and a corner office, ours, was named Cynthia, brilliant, driven an engine in heels, and if we're being honest, she cared about me longer than I ever let myself notice. Maybe I was blind, maybe I was unwilling, maybe both. She walked into my office later and saw Rachel on my lap, crayons everywhere, my tie with a small smear of purple where joy had overstepped its lane, and Cynthia's face went tight. "What is this girl doing in your office?" she said, voice high and sharp. "This is a company, not a playground." And Rachel slid off my lap so fast, the crayons rattled, clutching the box like evidence of innocence. "She's my guest," I said. "Treat her with respect." "Respect?" Cynthia laughed, with no humor. What can a 6-year-old possibly help with? Or is she replacing me too? And I felt the room tilting toward a fight I didn't want. So I said steadily, "Cynthia, you're one of the best minds we have, but don't ever speak about Rachel like that again." She stared, then left, and the door sighed in a way that told me this wasn't over. Days passed, and I kept showing up at the hospital with food, and quiet jollof rice, meat juice, a few cheap toys, the way men with money try to fix everything they don't know how to fix. But Rachel didn't want toys as much as she wanted dignity. She kept asking me, "Can I still work for you, sir?" And when I asked why, she said, "Because I don't want to owe anyone. And if you help us, I should help you, even if it's sweeping." And I felt my chest hurt, because this small human had the kind of pride that makes the world better, the kind that pays debts in effort and gratitude, not shame. Pattern interrupt. Quick check. If a child said that to you, would you laugh, or would you find her a broom and a purpose? One morning I brought Rachel back to the office, and she sat in the corner during a meeting with some foreign partners, coloring quietly, listening louder than anyone in the room. And out of nowhere, she stood, walked to one of the men, and whispered, "Sir, your shirt is dirty at the back." The table went silent, then someone chuckled, then all of us did, and I laughed in a way I hadn't in months, a laugh that sounded like it remembered me. I said, "Rachel has sharp eyes, that's why I hired her." And yeah, hired is a big word, but sometimes you try on a word and it fits truth before paperwork. Now here's where the wind changed, the moment you feel in your bones, before the trees even bend. Cynthia, nursing a cocktail of jealousy and fear, hired 2 private investigators. They went digging and found Rachel's origin story in a file cabinet the world never bothers to open unless it wants to judge a warehouse behind a nightclub on a baby in a dirty cloth, a clinic where no one came to claim her, a cleaner named Mabel, who kept her because no one else did, no adoption papers, just love, and the quiet bravery that doesn't trend. Then the leak. A tabloid headline screamed, "Exposed billionaire CEO takes in fake child sympathy scam," with photos of Rachel feeding Mabel, like love was a con game, words like street stray manipulation. And if you've ever watched strangers turn kindness into suspicion, you know how hard it is not to flip a table and call it justice. Lizzie brought me the tablet like it might bite. "You should see this," she said, and I put it down gently, because anger is gasoline if you forget where the sparks are. "Who did this?" I asked, and even before she answered, I knew the room I had to walk into. I confronted Cynthia. She denied leaking it, said she only sought the truth to protect the company reputation. And I looked at her the way you look at someone who is drowning in a pool with a lifeguard chair labeled image. "You think I care about reputation more than a child's dignity?" I asked, and my fist hit the desk so hard, the glass hummed. I don't raise my voice often, but when I do, it reminds me I still have a heart with volume. That wasn't enough, though. Who we blame can be a detour from what we need to learn. I needed the whole truth, the kind that doesn't fit in a headline. So I drove alone to the slum where Mabel lived. The streets narrow and stubborn, the houses small but clean, in the way pride keeps a place, even when money can't. And when I knocked, Rachel opened the door with a smile that could forgive almost anything. "Sir Jaden," she said, like my name was a good idea she had just remembered. Inside, a fan hummed a pot of soup, sent up a promise Mabel tried to sit up, and I asked her not to. I took a chair and told the room I needed the truth. "Is Rachel your biological daughter?" I asked, and silence pressed down on us like a second roof. Mabel's eyes filled, her hands shook. "No," she said finally. "I found her behind a warehouse. There was a letter pinned to her blanket." My heartbeat changed shape. What did it say? And she closed her eyes and recited from a place inside sorrow that keeps receipts. "I am sick. I cannot raise her. I got pregnant from a one-night mistake at Royal Preston Club. I don't know the man. Please, whoever finds her, raise her well. I have no means to care for her. Forgive me, a heartbroken mother." Royal Preston Club. That name hit me like a slammed door from years ago. There was a night I had sealed in a box and labeled, "Forget a night with friends after a brutal deal drinks." I should have refused a haze. I still don't understand. A morning I woke beside a woman whose name I never learned, shame like a coat I couldn't wear in daylight, and I left before she opened her eyes. You know what I mean. The memory you refuse to touch because you're afraid it will touch back. I left Mabel's apartment with a storm in my chest and ordered a DNA test, the kind of envelope that arrives with the weight of a verdict. 2 days later, I sat alone in my office and stared at my name on a piece of paper that read, "Paternity match 99%. And the sound I made was not a business sound. It was the sound a man makes when the past calls collect, and he finally answers. I cried quietly hard with the thick kind of tears that ditch pride on their way out. And then I got in the car and drove to that brown door like my life was tied to the handle. Rachel was outside with a small doll Lizzie bought her. She looked up and saw my face, and her smile paused. I knelt in the dust so our eyes could agree, "Rachel," I said, and my voice shook. "I'm not just your boss." She waited, still steady, learning to read a man like a page. "I'm your father," and for a second nothing moved. Then her mouth opened like it had found the word it was born for. "You're my daddy," and I nodded and cried again, and she threw her arms around my neck, and I held her like the world was trying to spin too fast, and I was the only weight that could keep her safe. Behind us, Mabel stood in the doorway, with tears that looked like relief and grief holding hands. "I didn't know," she said, "I just couldn't leave her." And I took her hand and said the most honest sentence I had spoken in years. "You saved her. You raised her. You're a part of this family. If you want to be, love makes family, and blood just confirms it. If it were you, would you forgive a man like me, Or would you say a child's courage shouldn't clean up an adult's mistake? Do you think that's fair? The next morning I called an all-hands meeting. The hall felt like a courtroom and a church. At the same time, Rachel's hand was small and sure in mine. Lizzie stood behind us like a guardian angel who reads spreadsheets. I took the mic and said, "You met this little girl when she came in barefoot and brave. I thought I was helping her today. I'll tell you the truth. Rachel is my daughter, my biological child." And the room inhaled so hard, the air changed shape. Some people clapped through tears. Some bowed their heads like prayer in the corner. Cynthia stared at the floor like the tiles were telling her things she didn't want to hear. I didn't gloat. Vengeance is cheap, growth is expensive. If you mocked her, I said, if you whispered words like street or stray, I hope you understand something. Now dignity isn't a prize for the comfortable. It's a right we owe each other, and we will run this company with that in mind. That afternoon, Cynthia came by with eyes that were raw and makeup that was trying to be brave. She apologized to me and then turned to Rachel and apologized again. And Rachel, who collects grudges for about 3 seconds before turning them into hugs, wrapped her arms around Cynthia's neck and said, "It's okay, can we be friends? And if you're looking for the miracle in this story, it's not the money or even the DNA. It's that a child who had been called astray taught a room full of adults what strength looks like when it kneels and forgives." Life changed fast after that, but not in a movie montage way. Real change has paperwork and late nights and small victories that taste like big ones. I gave Mabel a house in my estate not as a trophy, but as a stop to the years of running. I offered her a job at our foundation, building a program for abandoned children, because walls and roofs are good. But purpose is oxygen, she said yes, with hands that shook and a smile that could light stairwells. Rachel ran through the new place shouting, "Mommy, I have my own room with flowers." And I stood in the hallway, listening to the sound of a family forming in the spaces where silence used to sleep. School came next, white and blue uniform, polished black shoes, a pink backpack with Rachel Williams embroidered in gold like the world finally learned to spell her. We stood at the gate and she squeezed my hand and whispered, "What if they don't like me?" And I bent down and said, they might not either way. You're loved, and that doesn't need a vote inside." She shared snacks with a girl who had none found a boy's. Lost pencil corrected a math problem with a seriousness that made the teacher smile. And when someone asked who taught her to be kind, she said, "My mommy taught me love, my daddy taught me courage." And I stepped into the hallway, because that's a good place to pretend you have dust in your eyes. Sometimes we forget our lives can change shape without permission. Mine did on a rooftop restaurant with candles flickering and a view that looked like the city had decided to be beautiful for free. Mabel wore a simple peach dress that made me forget half the vocabulary I use to impress investors. Rachel wore yellow and held both our hands like she was stitching us together for keeps. We laughed through dinner. Rachel told stories about the boy who called her the girl with the golden name. And on the balcony, we took a picture, the three of us smiling, like we knew what the word home meant again. A few weeks later, I set a small table at home, just the three of us, candles, soft music, a dessert. I burned and tried to pretend I didn't. After we ate, I took Mabel's hand and said, "The day you walked into my life, everything changed. You gave me back my daughter, my smile, my peace." And I nodded to Rachel, who came forward with a red box she had been hiding behind her back, with the kind of seriousness that makes a moment. "Holy Mommy," she said. "Daddy says love means family, and you're ours." I went to one knee, opened the box, and asked Mabel to marry me. She said yes, with tears that made the candles jealous. Rachel squealed, And I thought this is what it feels like when the universe exhale. Pattern interrupt. Before you roll the credits, let's talk about the part that doesn't fit on a postcard. The headlines didn't all turn into fairy tales overnight. Some people said I bought a family. Some said I used charity to hide a past mistake. Some wanted the name of the woman from that night years ago and pushed to turn her pain into content. Strangers debated whether Rachel's forgiveness was naive or noble. Donors asked if our foundation would help children who didn't have a billionaire in their contact list. Journalists asked if my story proved destiny or privilege. And maybe you're asking the same questions right now. Maybe you should. Maybe I should too. If it were you, do you think second chances should be this expensive? Is redemption easier for men with drivers and private elevators? Or did I just finally say yes when life asked me to be a father? With courage instead of a CEO with excuses, do you think that's fair? Here's what I know without a graph or a press release. Rachel saved me before the envelope did. She saved me when she stood on my marble floors and asked for work. Instead of pity, she saved me when she laughed at my terrible drawing and taught my office that joy can be professional. She saved me when she said she didn't want to owe anyone and turned dignity into a language I needed to relearn. Mabel saved me too. She saved me when she picked up a baby and wrote a life with love instead of paperwork, when she held up the mirror I had been avoiding and didn't flinch when she said yes to a future that wouldn't have existed without her bravery on a morning the city didn't notice. We live quieter now, not smaller, just truer. Breakfast is pancakes, I flip badly, while Rachel cheers like it's a sports school, pickups. Our negotiations, about 5 more minutes on the swing. Foundation, days are heavy and holy, stories of kids who refuse to be statistics. Mothers who didn't plan to be heroes but are anyway. And at night, when the house is finally still, Mabel and I sit on the porch and talk about how to make the kind of world where a girl like Rachel never has to ask for a job to buy her mother more time. We talk about adoption laws that need to make love legal faster, about hospitals that shouldn't wait for a man with a loud last name, about schools that confuse zip codes for potential, about companies that mistake reputation for morality. We argue gently, we cry, sometimes we plan things that scare us in the best way. Do I think destiny did this? Or did accountability finally catch up and decide to look like grace? Maybe both. Sometimes I think about the woman who wrote that letter, the one I failed and never found, and I say this to her in my head. Your daughter is safe. She is louder than fear and smarter than my ego. She loves spaghetti. She dances like no one's watching, even when we are. And I promise you, with a seriousness I didn't have back then, I will not fail her again. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. We took that pain and built a pilot program at the foundation that pairs emergency medical funds with legal support for guardians like Mabel. Not just a bill paid, but papers filed, names, protected futures, made official. And the first month, we did it for 12 families. The next month, 20, now more. It's slower than the internet, but faster than despair, and I'm asking you something. I don't ask lightly, help us keep it going. Not because it makes me look good, but because it makes kids visible. You know what I mean. So here's how I want to end this, not with a bow, with a question that belongs to all of us. Do we want a world where compassion depends on a billionaire's mood, or a world where a child's dignity is guaranteed before she learns how to spell it? If we say the second one, what are you willing to change tomorrow morning at 9:30 when the elevator opens and your routine tries to swallow your courage whole? If it were you, would you have taken her hand? Would you have believed a crayon note over your calendar? Would you have risked the headlines to do the human thing? I know I got lucky. I know the ending. I'm telling you is softer than most people get, and I know money turned my yes into outcomes faster. And I know that's not fair, but I also know this: if we wait for perfect fairness to act, we'll never move. So I'm moving one kid, one mother, one policy draft, one uncomfortable conversation with a board member at a time. Hold me to it. Write your criticism. Tell me where I need to go further. I'm listening. This started with a door opening and a choice I almost missed. It became a fight with jealousy and gossip, and a piece of paper that knocked me to my knees. It turned into a family and a mission and a picture on a balcony that looks like home. And it's not over, not by a long shot, because love that fixes one life should at least try to argue with the system that broke 100. Now it's your turn. Do you believe in second chances the way I do now? Or do you think I got off easy because I'm rich? Would you have forgiven me in Mabel's place? Would you have apologized in Cynthia's heels? What would you tell that nurse, that gossip site, that man I used to be? Drop your thoughts below. Don't hold back. Disagree if you need to share your own story. If you've ever had to choose dignity over convenience. If this made you feel anything angry or hopeful, or both, at once share it with someone who needs a reason to reach down and lift up. Subscribe for more true stories where power has to earn its right to be in the room, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, if a small hand reaches for yours, don't look at your watch. Look at your heart and say yes.